I think it's good for us to get started. There might be people joining us as we go, but let me start by saying thanks to you all for joining us today. As you know, this is something I really enjoy to do and look forward to, like every second or third Friday that we do it. It's like, mate, I will stop thinking about work and everything else for an hour and just learn something new. Um, so this is absolutely awesome to be back. So today we're bringing Abdul Mhanni. Is that how I pronounce your name?
Yes, sir.
Abdul? Awesome, cool. Abdul, can you move to the next slide, please?
Absolutely. Yep. Oop, here we are.
Yeah, a little bit about house rules. So as you guys know, since we're a group, let's keep the mics muted because sometimes you forget to mute yourself and there is a background noise, a cat or a dog or a baby crying. So let's try to avoid that. Raise your hand to speak. We'll follow the order. Recording and posting on YouTube. So if you're not comfortable with your image on YouTube, please make sure that you turn off your camera. English only. We know that we get people from quite a few different places here. Don't be shy. So we're not here to judge. We're here to learn. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, send your question via chat. And let's make this fun. So the idea is to create this safe space where we can ask all the questions, even the stupid questions that some people believe might be stupid, but it's not asking a question is stupid in my opinion. So make sure that you ask questions. It's a great opportunity, safe environment for you to ask them. So Abdul, next page, please. Cool. Excellent. So probably most of you know me already, but I will quickly introduce myself. My name is Adri Leite. I run two cybersecurity businesses, Cliffside Cybersecurity behind me, and CyberRing, which is a cybersecurity compliance platform. I've been in the cyberspace for more than 25 years. Been running the business in Australia since 2014. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by Abdul. And Abdul, can you please introduce yourself? Just tell us who you are, what you've been up to, and a little bit about the topic you're going to cover today.
100%. And it's a pleasure to have you guys here. And it's a pleasure for me myself to be here. So thank you for having me. So my name is Abdul. I'm 22 years old. I study electrical engineering at the University of Sydney. I'm in my third year, first semester now. And I also work as a DFIR analyst at Gridware. I've got, had the privilege to get a couple of certifications, and I started my journey in cyber about 6 years ago. And yeah, it's been quite a bit of a ride ever since. And I'm hoping that today, I get to share a little bit about what I've done in those last 6 years, what has worked for me, what hasn't worked for me, and what I think maybe that, others can potentially benefit from, not just what, worked out for me, but also maybe learn from some of the mistakes or omissions that I might have made and, make the road to success for you a little bit easier than it was for me.
Awesome. So, Abdul, can you tell us what does DFIR mean?
DFIR means digital forensics and incident response. You can imagine it like a police officer,
Mm-hmm.
but in the digital slash internet slash computer world, right? When
That's
you've
pretty
been
cool.
compromised, when you've been hacked, if you've had the displeasure of having money stolen from you via fund misdirection, right? You
Mm-hmm.
usually don't call the police. The police won't deal with it. Instead, you call someone like me, right? So we come in, we investigate what happened, we help coordinate with your insurer, and then ultimately we fix the problem, kind of like a doctor, but for your computer slash accounts.
Excellent.
Yeah.
More like an emergency department doctor as opposed to specialist, I would say.
Yes, yes, that is correct. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, I'll let you present now. So please
100% we can
navigate through
get
the
going.
slides
Yeah,
as you
awesome.
please.
Absolutely. All right, let's do it. So I think that it obviously I've heard some people here and myself included are at university, and I think that's a really good, kind of launch into how things are, and I think it's really good to start off with that. So maximizing your time at university is invaluable. And I say that because university is a platform that, yes, it lacks spoon feeding you a lot of those direct skills, but it also provides you with a platform that you won't get anywhere else, right? So I would start off by saying cybersecurity societies are amazing. They're godsend, right? For example, just yesterday we had a panel at the University of Sydney Cyber Society, and at that panel there was myself, there was a monitoring and detection response analyst from Sophos, one of the world's largest cybersecurity consultancies, right? We had penetration testers from CyberCX, arguably the biggest cybersecurity company in Australia and New Zealand, right? And so cybersecurity societies offer you a really great way to, engage not just directly with people in the industry, but practical opportunities for you to build your skill sets. And if you're at university, the first thing you should do is sign up for your cybersecurity society. And the second thing is to actually keep up with uh, the latest and greatest events they're having. The second part that university offers you that you can't really get anywhere else that I implore people at university to take advantage of is your lecturers, right? Network with your lecturers because your lecturers have a lot of levers in their disposal to really get you involved with some really amazing, cool stuff. And a lot of the time, the barrier to entries of these is very low because, well, very many people aren't interacting with their lecturers. They aren't showing enthusiasm. They aren't showing, real interest in those topics. And your lecturers can really get you involved with some great projects, even if you have no prior experience. Like obviously, we know that it's really hard to get entry level positions in the field, and it's almost like a cheat code when you get really friendly, get really respectful, get good terms with your lecturer, and they're involved in a security related or adjacent field, and they can really be the first kind of experience you get. And as we know, the first role is the hardest one, and after that, it just keeps getting easier and easier. And I guess the last point is if those other two opportunities don't exist, then create them yourself, right? And what do I mean by that? There's two folds to that, right? Let's say you chat with your advisor or your lecturers, right, in a cybersecurity module, and you ask them, hey, like I'm really interested in, things like detection, right, where you write rules to detect malicious activity. I think that's really cool. Do you have any projects that you guys are doing at the back end of that? And when your lecturer says, oh, no, I don't think we have any of that, well, then you can pitch that, right? You can be like, oh, would you be open to having a project run with your supervision that I could spearhead where we introduce this as a curricula or as part of like the research or projects that we do at the university. And a lot of the time, thankfully in the cyberspace at least, right, you don't really need money to do a lot of the research. Like actually you don't need any money. You just need a virtual machine or a computer and your wits. And so a lot of the times you'll find that if you approached your lecturer and the opportunity isn't already there, you will have a non-zero chance of being successful and starting that project yourself. And then it's not only that you're doing the project, but you can also say that you spearheaded it, and that shows additional skills, not just hard skills, but you start introducing the soft skills that are equally as important. And so that's a really good way that if the opportunity doesn't exist, then you approach your lecturer and try to create it. And then on the flip side is that universities have a lot of opportunities for you to start your own project and get financial funding for those, right? Depending on which university you are, there's a lot of money. And if there's not direct money, then there's indirect support, things like providing you business sales support, things like providing you with spaces, things like providing you with technology, right? And so if you find that, like you have an idea and you really want to execute it on it and you really want to start engaging with it and put yourself out there, and the opportunity doesn't already exist, then you can start up your own project at universities and take advantage of startup incubators of, funding and competitions and hackathons that your universities very likely provide you for you to spearhead, your own way to that. Yeah.
That's absolutely awesome to learn about, and also everything you described here. I would say very little of it is technical in nature. It's mostly your soft skills, right?
Yeah.
Being proactive, reaching out to people, creating opportunities. So this is like very little about cyber itself and way more about being proactive and making things happen, connecting, networking. So you don't need to be a cyber specialist to do any of those, I would say. Not to
Not at
that
all.
point.
Not at all. At least not yet, right? Because all of this is how you get your foot in the door and in the context of the universities, right? And they're more so looking for those soft skills. Your lecturers, chances are looking for those soft skills, right? And then once you've really gotten yourself through the door, this is where I like to say that, and then the responsibility goes up to you, right? Once you've created that opportunity, once you've done and you've capitalized on all those soft skills, then it becomes on your shoulders to put in the time and the effort to get those hard skills.
Absolutely. Any questions so far, folks? Otherwise, Abdul, feel free to move to the next
Awesome.
slide.
Um, really, university is really controversial, as we know. Not everyone's at university. Not everyone enjoys university, and that's totally okay, especially in cybersecurity, right? And so, no uni, no problem. And you are not starved for opportunity and chances to really push the envelope and still get yourself into the door. The number one thing I love to talk about is cadetships, traineeships, placements, whatever you like to call them, right? These are usually provided to anyone who's at um, leaving high school, right? All you need is a high school diploma, basically. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, PwC, Deloitte, all those big companies have these spaces reserved exclusively for people without a university degree, right? A lot of them are for cybersecurity related functions. Just earlier today, when I was researching this, the Australian Signals Directorate had a cadetship for cybersecurity that's open where they will give you $800 per week plus cover your education costs, right? And that's just one example. PwC, Microsoft, Amazon, all of these major companies provide traineeships, cadetships, placements, right? Where if you aren't in university, if you didn't go to university, if you've graduated high school in the last 2 years, then you can apply for these roles that are specifically catered towards you, right? And that gives you a chance to work towards not just gaining professional experience, right? You get a big name company on your CV, and it helps financially because you're being paid in these traineeships, cadetships, placements, and most importantly, you get a professional qualification, right? And that is something that will stick with you beyond just these programs. The second avenue available to you is if you're in New South Wales, then TAFE provides free cybersecurity qualifications. I cannot speak towards other states in Australia, but I believe that it is the same, that there's a big push towards getting people into cybersecurity, and it's a big opportunity to capitalize on CAFE because it is very either cost effective, where it can cost a couple of grand a year, and depending on your situation, it would be totally free. And that gives you, again, a professional qualification, which you can then use to launchpad yourself, that is more practical. It's shorter than a university degree. It costs less and, provides you an avenue. And the third option that also a lot of people kind of admit is sure, let's say the first option didn't work out. You weren't able to get a cybersecurity traineeship, cadetship placement, right? And the second option, TAFE, is either not available to you because of your location. You may not be in Australia, or you're not interested in doing that. Then that's also perfectly okay. Non-security placement as an initial way in are another really underrated thing. Things like data center technician at Microsoft, right? Cloud associate at Google, and many more positions at associate consultant at places like PwC and Deloitte, right? All these are don't require a university degree. They require only a high school diploma and being an early leaver. And most importantly, they provide you an in, because once you're in and you've spent a year, 2 years doing that like grunt foundational work, right? And in the background, you're working on those other hard skills that are more directly security related, you can then leverage that. But once you have your foot in the door, everything can fall into place, right? So it becomes that, okay, if the other two options don't work, I don't have a university degree, fair enough. I couldn't get a direct cyber placement, fair enough. I'm not interested in doing a certificate or a diploma in cybersecurity. Well, then awesome. Get a placement or get a role in a non-security field at one of those major tech companies, right? Doing roles that are kind of security related, right? Leverage it as an opportunity, not just to get your foot in the door, but again, to help yourself out financially, right? Because you'd be getting paid to help yourself get a professional qualification, right? And to get, most importantly, experience. Because once you're in and you do a certification or two, you do some networking within those companies, you're set, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And so basically, what you're doing here is giving people not only a plan A, but also a plan B and a plan C, right?
Yeah,
So
100%. Yeah.
options apart from the university tips from previous slides. So that's very good insight. Thank you, Abdul.
And like you don't have to pick these plans in A, B, and C, right? You can chase all of them up in parallel, right? You can apply for that Australian Signals Directorate cadetship in 2026, and then you can go on the Microsoft website and immediately apply for the data center technician, right? And you can do all of these and pick the first one that bites and stick with it, because ultimately it is just about getting yourself the necessary qualifications to put your foot in the door, because once you do that, the game becomes a lot more fair because then it becomes up to you. And that you can kind of brave and handle, right? But when it's all that like blind shooting of sending your CV and trying to get employers to listen and all that, that introduces uncertainty, which I don't like, and I'm sure you don't like either. And so this kind of plan helps you take that uncertainty out by like, okay, if I don't have one thing, how can I leverage something else to close the gap? If I don't like X, okay, but I really like Y, how do I then use the thing I like to cancel out the negative impacts of the things that I don't like? And I'd love to answer any questions about people who have any specific things about the points that I've made and, want me to expand on anything.
Awesome. That's really good. So if people have questions, please just raise your hands. Otherwise, let's just move on to the next
Awesome.
slide.
100%. Okay. I call this the big jump because I think this is the biggest jump because for a lot of people, myself included, this ends up being the most uh, kind of different thing you end up doing in the field, right? Cybersecurity is unlike any other field in that everything, or let me say 90% of the quote unquote technical or hard skills that you need for the job, you can learn online, all of them without any context, right? But there's some caveats to that. So it's really easy to get overwhelmed because there's so many certifications, right? There's so many platforms, there's so many CTFs, there's so many things going on, everyone giving such varied and different advice, right? Every time you sign up to a platform, another platform crops up and you're wondering, oh, should I do this or should I do that, right? And it's really easy to really let that kind of stray you away because you're constantly jumping and shifting your focus. The biggest thing here is that you should stay focused and motivated. If you are interested in pen testing, then you want to stick with a learning path that is specifically targeted towards that. If you're enjoying DFIR, then 101% stick to that and expand your focus there. I really think that it's in cybersecurity especially, you can't see results in a month. You won't see results in 2 months. If you had practiced every day and you stuck with it every day, then you'll start to see the results in 3 months, right? So it's really important to pace yourself to make sure that you're focused and motivated and that when you're working through these kind of CTFs or learning paths or modules and you're doing all those things that you're remembering that it's going to be a struggle the first week and the second week and the third week. And that will take at least 3 months and things begin to settle and the building blocks fall in perfectly like Legos, right? And consistent practice really does beat heroic brute forcing. And I say that as somebody who had started my journey in cyber about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? It took me about, I remember, 2 weeks to finish my first CTF from start to finish when I first started, right? Because I had no clue. And I stuck with that and I really, really stuck with that. And I hadn't seen any results until 6 months ago. That's when I started getting certifications. That's when I started getting a role. What that means is that what you saw is this incredible progress in 6 months, but what it was is behind that was 5 years of really brutal, slow build up learning, right? And that's what I would implore that people keep in mind that it's going to take a while and it's going to take a bit of consistency, right? 2 hours every day. But you will start to notice that within 5, 6, 7, 8 months, a year, you are a totally different person from those consistent 2 hours a day, 2 hours a day. And that leads me into how you should go on about doing those, right? So obviously everyone would know here there's Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. For those who may not know, those are the best platforms for beginners who have zero background about cybersecurity to go jump in and learn really amazing hands-on skills at a really affordable rate, right? Hack the Box Academy costs $8 and Try Hack Me is like less than $12 per month. And it really does feature all the skills you may need and even beyond that, right? Another amazing platform is Offensive Security Fundamentals Library. It offers a really high quality, consistent learning. So it has like this wide variety of fundamental pathways, but it is a lot more expensive than Hack the Box Academy or Try Hack Me because it costs about $700 per year. And so, you can explore those platforms, right? You can see what lines up with your financial situation and what lines up with your interests. But really, you can't go wrong with any of those so long as you sit down, right? You commit to a platform for 3 months minimum. Ideally, it should be 6 months, right? You set yourself smart goals, right? Small, targeted, bite-sized things where you're like, I want to finish this path in 2 weeks, right? And you finish it. And then maybe you write a blog about it. You document your findings, right? And you really want to stick to it so that these practical hands-on skills build up bit by bit. And that's what you'll find is that the moment you start consistent, you let yourself the time to grow, to get used to it. Within 6 months, you are a totally different person skill wise, but that won't come immediately. And you may not necessarily notice it until one day you sit down and you're starting a CTF or a module and you find yourself not Googling the first moment the box starts. The first moment the box starts, you find yourself typing a command. And then something you saw from the command leads you to typing another one and a third one. And then you do the box for 30 minutes. And then you hit your first Google search and then you realize, hang on, I'd never done that before. I'd never been capable of producing from memory from pure skill set. And then that's when you start realizing that that consistent effort, the small bite-sized moves that you've done, and the commitment, especially the consistent commitment, will start to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I have to add to this is sometimes we look at, for example, $12 per month cost, and we think, oh, I can't spend $12 on this, but this is not, you're not spending, you're investing, right? It's an
100%.
investment. So just shift the mindset to it's a $12 investment in myself, as opposed to, like if you think brutally honest about this, if you think about it, it's less than the price of a drink when you go out, right? So
It's
it's
less than a Big Mac, yeah.
a bit less than a Big Mac. So it's an investment in yourself. So and of course, as with everything, we start fresh. It's going to be hard, right? So the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks is going to be hard. Probably week 4 is going to be much easier than week 1. That's for sure. So it's an ongoing evolution and progress journey. And it's like working out. You just don't go to the gym and you leave the gym and you're all like twice the size you were before, right? So you need to be consistent and go to the gym for months and even a year or 2 years with a discipline. And you're not going to notice the improvements on a day-to-day basis. But if you take a picture of yourself now and 12 months from now, you're going to be like, wow, I didn't see that happening, right? Like it was so gradual that it's hard to notice, but you do change, right? So yeah,
100%.
very good point, Abdul. Thank you for that.
100%. Um, Certifications, right? Some people love them, some people hate them. But the unfortunate reality is they have a very important role in cybersecurity, and not just in the hiring process, but to provide credibility, right? It is such a wide field, right? And it's very easy for anyone to say anything. And so certifications play the role in that they help validate that, at some basic level, some certain very important things, right? And so, especially at the entry level, certifications are a really important, I would say, part of the trifecta for when you are trying to get a role, right? And the other two are your soft skills, and the third one is your projects, which we'll talk about later. So certifications, right? There are hundreds, if not thousands of them. Most of them are not, I would not recommend. Most of them I wouldn't even look towards, right? And instead, you should really play your cards correct and focus on what really you only need, especially as somebody who's a newcomer. You don't want to spend more money. You don't want to spend more money and have like a lot of loss. You want to spend the bare minimum to get yourself the bare maximum results. So I'm going to split that into two streams, right? For blue teamers and for people who want to be red teamers, pen testers slash red teamers. For that, the hack the box CPTS, the Certified Penetration Testing Specialist, is unbeatable, right? It costs about $200 if you're a student, right? That includes the certification attempt and all the learning modules that you would need. The CPTS is a really respected technical certifications, and it's also really difficult. And that's really the trade-off, right? You are getting something for $200, but the flip side is that it is a very long journey. If you're a beginner, you can expect that it will take you 6 months to complete. The exam is really hard, but it is truly worth it. The other one is the OSCP, the Offensive Security Certified Professional, and that one is ultimately the gold standard for penetration testing, and it is almost like a requirement for many places, right? No matter at what level you are, a lot of places you'll see that they have job roles, job postings, sorry, it will say either OSCP preferred, or in some cases, I've seen people say OSCP required, and it didn't matter if it was for a role that was for somebody with 1 year's experience, 0 years experience, or 5 years experience. So if you want to get into penetration testing, the OSCP is almost a requirement for you. And obviously, that comes at a $1,800 expense. I think it is worth it. As somebody who did it, it opened doors for me that otherwise wouldn't have been opened had I not done it. And I think that it was I've already seen the return on investment multiplied many times. So that's something to consider. For the blue team side of things, it's unfortunate that it is very gatekeepy and very corporate. So the gold standard certifications for blue teaming are all very unaffordable, $8,000, right? Sans and kayak. But thankfully, blue teaming is a lot less about certifications, like significantly less about certifications, and more so about you demonstrating, your hands-on skills doing lab platforms, things like Hack the Box. Again, they have things like Sherlock's where you investigate compromises. Zintra Labs offers you simulations of threat actors compromising multi-host environments, right? And they're very realistic simulations of what I've seen at work from a tactics procedure and like from the tooling that they had. And Cyber Defenders has the most affordable blue team certificate that I know of that is costing $800. Obviously, that's a really high amount. I could totally understand that. E-learning security is another platform, not too well known, but it is something that is a lot more affordable at the $200 range, and it gives you something to put on your resume, right? Hack the Box also, just like the CPTS, it has something called the CDSA, the Certified Defensive Security Analyst, and that was also about $200 if you're a student. And so, if you're in the blue team side of things, you're a bit caged in. You have to put a lot more effort into creating a blog post. When you solve all these blue team CTFs, you want to write about your methodology. You want to create cheat sheets and references for people to use. For example, I can share my screen and show people some of the things I've done. So this is my GitHub. Hopefully everyone can see here. And I have a repository called Ghost Hunting in Splunk, right? And this repository, if I can enlarge properly, as you guys can see, is all about going over Splunk, right? Splunk is a SIEM tool. For those who don't know what a SIEM is, it's used to, kind of hunt for bad things that are happening across an entire environment, right? So I created kind of like a catalog where, I was like, hey, this this is how you use this tool. This is how you would find for certain things, right? And just going over it in a way that somebody who might have wanted to use the tool or who's comfortable with the tool but forgot a certain way to do something, then I created like kind of a reference sheet. And that's one of the ways in blue teaming at least that you end up having to to do kind of less about the certification at the entry level because they're so unaffordable for most of them other than the ones we mentioned, but more so like showcasing some of the CTFs for blue teamings that you guys have done. I imagine people might have questions about this slide especially, so I'm happy to stop there.
Yeah, I just have a few things to add to it. So as a minor suggestion, just change expense to investment for the
100%. Yeah.
it's an investment. And another thing that I usually tell people, and people that usually join these sessions have heard this from me many times before. Even if you undergo, let's say, a certification, let's say that $200, and you fail, what you need to do is to put yourself in a win-win situation, right? So if you pass, awesome. If you fail, you've learned where you should be improving, right? So just it's a win-win situation. So it's not like when you fail a $200 test, you're like, oh man, I failed, I'm gonna give up. No, now you know what you need to improve to do it again and hopefully not fail again, right? So I like to always put myself in win-win situations. How can I benefit from a situation even when I fail, right? So failure is not trying. That's my definition of failure. Failure is not trying. So failing a test is just part of the learning process, and hopefully for the next one you're going to be much more prepared, right?
100%.
So if you
100%.
if you build that mindset and follow that mindset, nothing is a setback, right? It's just
100%.
a step on your learning journey.
And I mean, you say like you bring up the failing the $200 certification. I actually failed the OSCP when I first got it, right? And I paid for this out of pocket when I was like barely like a teenager. This was in 2022, right? And it took me 3 years later, a couple of months ago, for me to finally get it. So failure is potentially a part of your journey, and that's okay, right? You just have to take it to the chin and keep persisting and keep going, and eventually things will line up so long as you stay consistent and true to it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And just one more thing to add here. If you're not consistent, someone else will be consistent and they will
100%.
beat you, right? So I think that your worst enemy here is not the amount of people competing for the same role. it's your own persistence and or lack of persistence and perhaps a negative view of the world. So just change your mindset and be like, mate, if this person can try 1,000 times, I can try 1,001 times, right? And I'm gonna beat them. I'm gonna get this job.
100%.
So I think that's what makes the difference. And just one more thing here because I think that's important to mention. And I've told you guys many times before. So I get people approaching me personally via LinkedIn on a daily basis for a job, right? Which is natural. But I have people that come to me and, well, I have people that just send me their CV via LinkedIn, no introduction, just a file, right? So I'm a cyber guy. I've been around for perhaps longer than Abdu has been alive. And
Yes.
and
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
I can guarantee you, I'm not going to open an unsolicited PDF or Word document, right? I want, I simply want. So be smart, right? So introduce yourself. Hey, Adri, this is my name. This is what I do. This is what I'm looking to do. Um, you might or might not have an opportunity at the moment. But when you do, I would like to say, put my hand up, and it would be really nice if you could spare 5 minutes of your time whenever you're available. I know you're a busy person, and like guys, you need to. I think one of the strategies for you to win in this game is put yourselves in my shoes as a business owner, right? So think how many things I have to handle on a daily basis, apart from my personal life. Just professional life, I have proposals to review, customers to talk to, issues to solve. So I have 100 things to do on a daily basis. So when you're approaching someone like someone that can potentially give you an opportunity, you need to be very mindful of their time. It's not that they don't want to help you. Sometimes it's they just don't have the time to even, respond to a message. So put yourself in that position and think, how could I get 5 minutes of attention from this person? And if you're approachable, if you say, listen, I'm fully committed to learning and getting to this space, and I would appreciate 5 minutes of your time. Let's say whenever you're available, it could be like after 6 p.m. or before 8 a.m., but it would be very helpful in my journey to learn from you the right thing to be done. And when people approach me from that angle, I can guarantee you the success rate is much greater than when you just send me a PDF, unsolicited PDF via LinkedIn or email that I'm like, there is no way in hell I'm going to open this attachment.
100%. 100%.
Sorry, mate. Sorry, mate. You
That's
carry on.
100%. No, I really appreciate that you brought that up. I think that's probably some of the most, I would say, that advice is the most important takeaway from this entire presentation that you just dropped, I think, because everything that I might have covered right now would be invalidated if, they didn't follow exactly what you had the honor of just going over. So yeah, that's really good, really important stuff. And I guess that brings us to really the last part of the trifecta, right? Alongside your soft skills, your certifications, your projects, right? All things side projects, right? A lot of people just Google cybersecurity side projects, right? And the majority of them, I will tell you, are really bad advice, right? They're either way out of scope for you, they're either too generic and have been done way too many times that people reading them might not necessarily feel attracted or particularly impressed, or they don't align, most importantly, with your interests. They don't align with your current skill sets, and they may not necessarily align with where you want to be. And I think that the side project thing is really easy to get wrong, but it's also really easy to get right. For example, I'm going to give a couple of examples again of what I go through and the kind of side projects that I've done, right? And so I've covered for this one for blue teamers, right? It's that I didn't, set up a Splunk server and just wrote on my CV I use Splunk, right? Because that kind of says nothing. what I did instead was something a lot more demonstrable that if somebody has a question, if I understand adversaries, if I understand threat hunting, if I understand how to use Splunk or how to query or how to filter out through noise, that general thought process that's a lot more valuable than the tool, then they can go on my GitHub and they can see that I'm well aware of, for example, where commonly abused locations, right? Malware always places itself in what is called as world writable files or folders where every user on a system can write to them, right? See Windows temp, see Windows tasks, right? App data local. All these are world writable, right? And so I have a conceptual understanding, and I've not just that, I've demonstrated that, right? I have a demonstrated understanding of how to, for example, go through false positives, right? So a lot of potential activity in a system are done by the normal Windows operating system, right? And that is usually by the system user. And for example, if I'm looking for something like files created, I don't want to see the files created by the system user because I know that those are done by the Windows operating system. They're noise, right? And so just being able to demonstrate all this instead of saying I set up Splunk and I used a bit of Splunk, I had created a GitHub repository that was free, and I had, created a very thorough, in-depth cheat sheet on how to actually go through the process, right? And that's not just that. I guess if you're on the red teaming side, for examples, right? I created a little repository where I really wanted to cover this tools, right? I identified a set of problems as I go through CTFs, as I go through the learning of my certifications, as I just, read things like the DFIR report, or I read, articles written by people like Harmjoy, like Sean Metcalf, like the guys who made all these major tools, right? I kind of pick up and identify as I'm going along with CTFs or learning, like, hey, like this is something that I couldn't really do. Is there a way that I can overcome this? Right? For example, I noticed that it is very hard to find the permissions of your user in Active Directory, right? Let's say you've compromised an Active Directory environment, right? And you're like, okay, I have this user. What can this user do? Where can I move? Who can I then abuse, right? What is called as outbound permissions. What can I do to everyone else? This sounds trivial, but there's actually not a really unified, straight, easy command that provides you this. So when I realized this, I was like, hang on, then this is a good thing for me to build out myself. And having built it out now, it's I'm proud to say that it's really featured a lot by people who are doing the offensive security experience penetration tester certification, or the OSEP, right? So when I go on the OSEP Discord in the Challenge Lab or the Module Labs, I see a lot of people using the script, right? And I've written other tools that, I'm really proud when I, go on the Discord and I see somebody is using a file called, meow, right? And I know that's me because that is my file, right? And so you can see that the projects aren't insane. They're not big. They're not something that I just pulled out from like a Google search, like, hey, like good cybersecurity projects. I didn't do anything other than just go with the flow of my normal learning, whether it was certifications, whether it was me solving Hack the Box CTFs or the Hack the Box Academy modules or the offensive security learning paths. And when I identified the little gap, something where it was a bit awkward to do with available information, I wrote myself, right? I came up with creative things as I went through these courses, and then I provided a way to address some of the issues that I face, right? Or like, I guess I experienced that I couldn't really find proper ways to find like a cheat sheet for Windows and Active Directory, right? So I went on and, now I am the maintainer of this project, right? Where, it's got like 1,600, almost 1,600 stars, right? And it's just like a repository for commands that you can use to, perform penetration testing on Active Directory and Windows environments. What I'm trying to, I guess, communicate here is that your projects don't have to be some of those big, huge things that you may see online when you just Google, side projects for cybersecurity. Your best bet is doing something that you end up stumbling upon as a potential pain point, right? As you saw, most of my projects are not huge, right? A lot of them are, you may think, more simplistic, but they're actually a lot more important and core because they're usable, right? And I would implore you when you're thinking about side projects to think about things that are usable, that somebody else will value, somebody will use, somebody will pick up, somebody will deploy, right? And those are usually small. And those are usually not on Google searches. Those are usually things you will experience as you're doing those CTFs, like I mentioned, learning paths, and then find out that there's a little gap. And then you fix that gap, right? Or you're using a tool like Metasploit or NetExec, right? And you might be proficient in the Ruby programming language in Python, and you realize the tool isn't doing something that you think a lot of people would really appreciate, then you can kind of ride the popularity of that tool and contribute to that open source tool, NetExec Metasploit, and you can use that as a major advantage, right? Because you're contributing to something already well established, well used, popular, and you're learning how to use an important framework or tool or, picking up adjacent skills along the way. And ultimately, the best thing is that there will be things that you are interested in because there will be things that you naturally find, right? Things that you've experienced, things that once you've done things on the keyboard, you notice these shortfalls and you're motivated and you're passionate and you're interested enough to actually solve those problems. And those make for easier projects, those make for more useful projects, and those make for more impressive projects.
Awesome insights. Thank you, Abdul.
And yeah, I think that brings us to the Q&A section of today's talk. Yeah.
Excellent. Very, very informative, Abdul. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think for people starting their journey in the cyberspace, more often than not, there is no uh, map or guidance on what to do next. So you have to discover things yourself. But I think you're giving people a good blueprint of how to get started, right? So any path is a good path towards, provided that you know where you're heading to, right? So it doesn't matter if you're turning left or right, as long as you know where you're going to, that's a great approach to things. And I think you've given people some ideas of how to tackle it, which is absolutely awesome. Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
100%.
Any questions, folks? Wait for people to volunteer and raise their hands or send questions via chat. But in the meantime, Abdul, you mentioned something about bi-weekly Discord channel. What is that about?
Yeah, so I think that, in case people are like, beginners and wanting a bit more guidance, a bit more hand-holding, a bit more community feel to, just solving stuff, I think it'd be good for us to consider, if people are interested in setting up a bi-weekly meetup where we sit down and solve a hack the box free tier machine, a retired one, because then everyone can do it basically for free. And, we can work through it together. I can share some tips and methodologies and hopefully impart some of the knowledge I might have picked up, and you guys, get to learn and hopefully also have a good time. Yeah.
Awesome, that's great. So if you guys are interested, Abdul, how can people find you on LinkedIn
Yeah,
or?
LinkedIn 100%. You guys can find me on Discord as well. I'm going to put my Discord handle right here. It is and on LinkedIn. I'm always, always, always open for a chat. I'm always open to helping people out. If you ever have a question, whether it be about careers, whether it be about like you just want to talk and you're interested in cybersecurity, I'm always open to chatting about the latest and greatest things. And yeah, feel free to
Oh,
reach out for me for whatever. I'm always happy to help out.
excellent. Abdul, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your time with us today. Guys, if you have any questions, comments post this session, please reach out to Abdul. As you can see, he's very approachable, very knowledgeable as well. So I would like to thank you all for joining us today. And once again, thank you, Abdul, for sharing your knowledge with us and sparing some time with us as well.